Dear Ms. Larson, I am writing to you with new information about your current membership. Last year, you signed up for our museum membership that provides special discounts. As stated in the last newsletter, this year we are happy to be celebrating our 50th anniversary, so we would like to offer you further benefits. These include free admission for up to 10 people and 20% off museum merchandise on your next visit. You will also be invited to all new exhibition openings this year at discounted prices. We hope you enjoy these offers. For any questions, please feel free to contact us. Best regards, Stella Harrison. Once again, I had lost the piano contest to my friend. When I learned that Linda had won, I was deeply troubled and unhappy. My body was shaking with uneasiness. My heart beat quickly, and my face became reddish. I had to run out of the concert hall to settle down. Sitting on the stairs alone, I recalled what my teacher had said. Life is about winning, not necessarily about winning against others, but winning at being you. And the right way to win is to figure out who you are and do your best. He was absolutely right. I had no reason to oppose my friend. Instead, I should focus on myself and my own improvement. I breathed out slowly. My hands were steady now. At last, my mind was at peace. The single most important change you can make in your working habits is to switch to creative work first, reactive work second. This means blocking off a large chunk of time every day for creative work on your own priorities, with the phone and email off. I used to be a frustrated writer. Making this switch turned me into a productive writer. Yet there wasn't a single day when I sat down to write an article, blog post, or book chapter without a string of people waiting for me to get back to them. It wasn't easy, and it still isn't, particularly when I get phone messages beginning, "I sent you an email 2 hours ago." By definition, this approach goes against the grain of others' expectations and the pressures they put on you. It takes willpower to switch off the world, even for an hour. It feels uncomfortable, and sometimes people get upset. But it's better to disappoint a few people over small things than to abandon your dreams for an empty inbox. Otherwise, you're sacrificing your potential for the illusion of professionalism. The 21st century is the age of information and knowledge. It is a century that is characterized by knowledge as the important resource that gains competitive advantage for companies. To acquire all these knowledge and information, organizations must rely on the data that they store. Data, the basic element, is gathered daily from different input sources. Information is extracted or learned from these sources of data, and this captured information is then transformed into knowledge that is eventually used to trigger actions or decisions. By and large, organizations do not have any problem of not having enough data because most organizations are rich with data. The problem, however, is that many organizations are poor in information and knowledge. This fact translates into one of the biggest challenges faced by organizations: how to transform raw data into information and eventually into knowledge, which, if exploited correctly, provides the capabilities to predict customers' behavior and business trends. Problem framing amounts to defining what problem you are proposing to solve. This is a critical activity because the frame you choose strongly influences your understanding of the problem, thereby conditioning your approach to solving it. For an illustration, consider Thibodeau and Broditsky's series of experiments in which they asked people for ways to reduce crime in a community. They found that the respondents' suggestions changed significantly, depending on whether the metaphor used to describe crime was as a virus or as a beast. People presented with a metaphor comparing crime to a virus invading their city emphasized prevention and addressing the root causes of the problem, such as eliminating poverty and improving education. On the other hand, people presented with the beast metaphor focused on remediations, increasing the size of the police force and prisons. Mending and restoring objects often require even more creativity than original production. The pre-industrial blacksmith made things to order for people in his immediate community, customizing the product. Modifying or transforming it according to the user was routine. Customers would bring things back if something went wrong. Repair was thus an extension of fabrication. With industrialization and eventually with mass production, making things became the province of machine tenders with limited knowledge. But repair continued to require a larger grasp of design and materials, an understanding of the whole, and a comprehension of the designer's intentions. Manufacturers all work by machinery or by vast subdivision of labor and not, so to speak, by hand, an 1896 Manual of Mending and Repairing explained. But all repairing must be done by hand. We can make every detail of a watch or of a gun by machinery, but the machine cannot mend it when broken, much less a clock or a pistol. Share of the global middle class by region in 2015 and in 2025. The above graphs show the percentage share of the global middle class by region in 2015 and its projected share in 2025. It is projected that the share of the global middle class in Asia-Pacific will increase from 46% in 2015 to 60% in 2025. The projected share of Asia-Pacific in 2025, the largest among the 6 regions, is more than 3 times that of Europe in the same year. The shares of Europe and North America are both projected to decrease from 24% in 2015 to 16% in 2025 for Europe and from 11% in 2015 to 8% in 2025 for North America. Central and South America is not expected to change from 2015 to 2025 in its share of the global middle class. In 2025, the share of the Middle East and North Africa will be larger than that of Sub-Saharan Africa as it was in 2015. Donato Bramante, born in Fermignano, Italy, began to paint early in his life. His father encouraged him to study painting. Later, he worked as an assistant of Piero della Francesca in Urbino. Around 1480, he built several churches in a new style in Milan. He had a close relationship with Leonardo da Vinci, and they worked together in that city. Architecture became his main interest, but he did not give up painting. Bramante moved to Rome in 1499 and participated in Pope Julius II's plan for the renewal of Rome. He planned the new Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, one of the most ambitious building projects in the history of humankind. Bramante died on April 11, 1514, and was buried in Rome. His buildings influenced other architects for centuries. Like whole individuals, cells have a lifespan. During their life cycle, cell size, shape, and metabolic activities can change dramatically. A cell is born as a twin when its mother cell divides, producing 2 daughter cells. Each daughter cell is smaller than the mother cell, and except for unusual cases, each grows until it becomes as large as the mother cell was. During this time, the cell absorbs water, sugars, amino acids, and other nutrients, and assembles them into new, living protoplasm. After the cell has grown to the proper size, its metabolism shifts, as it either prepares to divide or matures and differentiates into a specialized cell. Both growth and development require a complex and dynamic set of interactions involving all cell parts. That cell metabolism and structure should be complex would not be surprising, but actually they are rather simple and logical. Even the most complex cell has only a small number of parts, each responsible for a distinct, well-defined aspect of cell life. Sport can trigger an emotional response in its consumers, of the kind rarely brought forth by other products. Imagine bank customers buying memorabilia to show loyalty to their bank, or consumers identifying so strongly with their car insurance company that they get a tattoo with its logo. We know that some sport followers are so passionate about players, teams, and the sport itself that their interest borders on obsession. This addiction provides the emotional glue that binds fans to teams and maintains loyalty even in the face of on-field failure. While most managers can only dream of having customers that are as passionate about their products as sport fans, the emotion triggered by sport can also have a negative impact. Sports' emotional intensity can mean that organizations have strong attachments to the past through nostalgia and club tradition. As a result, they may ignore efficiency, productivity, and the need to respond quickly to changing market conditions. For example, a proposal to change club colors in order to project a more attractive image may be defeated because it breaks a link with tradition. Jeffrey A. Rogers, a vice president of a big company, was once taught the simple idea of pausing to refresh. It began when Jeff realized that as he drove home from work each evening, his mind was still focused on work-related projects. We all know this feeling. We may have left the office physically, but we are very much still there mentally, as our minds get caught in the endless loop of replaying the events of today and worrying about all the things we need to get done the following day. So now, as he gets to the door of his house, he applies what he calls the pause that refreshes. He stops for just a moment. He closes his eyes. He breathes in and out once, deeply and slowly. As he exhales, he lets the work issues fall away. This allows him to walk through the front door to his family with more singleness of purpose. It supports the sentiment attributed to Lao Tzu. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. A variety of theoretical perspectives provide insight into immigration. Economics, which assumes that actors engage in utility maximization, represents one framework. From this perspective, it is assumed that individuals are rational actors, i.e., that they make migration decisions based on their assessment of the costs as well as benefits of remaining in a given area versus the costs and benefits of leaving. Benefits may include but are not limited to short-term and long-term monetary gains, safety, and greater freedom of cultural expression. People with greater financial benefits tend to use their money to show off their social status by purchasing luxurious items. Individual costs include, but are not limited to, the expense of travel, uncertainty of living in a foreign land, difficulty of adapting to a different language, uncertainty about a different culture, and the great concern about living in a new land. Psychic costs associated with separation from family, friends, and the fear of the unknown also should be taken into account in cost-benefit assessments. According to the market response model, it is increasing prices that drive providers to search for new sources, innovators to substitute, consumers to conserve, and alternatives to emerge. Taxing certain goods or services, and so increasing prices, should result in either decreased use of these resources or creative innovation of new sources or options. The money raised through the tax can be used directly by the government, either to supply services or to search for alternatives. Many examples of such green taxes exist. Facing landfill costs, labor expenses, and related costs in the provision of garbage disposal, for example, some cities have required households to dispose of all waste in special trash bags, purchased by consumers themselves, and often costing $1 or more each. The results have been greatly increased recycling and more careful attention by consumers to packaging and waste. By internalizing the costs of trash to consumers, there has been an observed decrease in the flow of garbage from households. The earliest humans had access to only a very limited number of materials, those that occur naturally: stone, wood, clay, skins, and so on. With time, they discovered techniques for producing materials that had properties superior to those of the natural ones. These new materials included pottery and various metals. Furthermore, it was discovered that the properties of a material could be altered by heat treatments and by the addition of other substances. At this point, materials utilization was totally a selection process that involved deciding from a given, rather limited set of materials, the one best suited for an application based on its characteristics. It was not until relatively recent times that scientists came to understand the relationships between the structural elements of materials and their properties. This knowledge, acquired over approximately the past 100 years, has empowered them to fashion, to a large degree, the characteristics of materials. Thus, tens of thousands of different materials have evolved with rather specialized characteristics that meet the needs of our modern and complex society, including metals, plastics, glasses, and fibers. The idea that planting trees could have a social or political significance appears to have been invented by the English, though it has since spread widely. According to Keith Thomas's History, Man and the Natural World, 17th and 18th century aristocrats began planting hardwood trees, usually in lines, to declare the extent of their property and the permanence of their claim to it. What can be more pleasant, the editor of a magazine for gentlemen asked his readers, than to have the bounds and limits of your own property preserved and continued from age to age by the testimony of such living and growing witnesses? Planting trees had the additional advantage of being regarded as a patriotic act, for the Crown had declared a severe shortage of the hardwood on which the Royal Navy depended. For English aristocrats, planting trees served as statements to mark the lasting ownership of their land, and it was also considered to be an exhibition of their loyalty to the nation. The idea that planting trees could have a social or political significance appears to have been invented by the English, though it has since spread widely. According to Keith Thomas's History, Man and the Natural World, 17th and 18th century aristocrats began planting hardwood trees, usually in lines, to declare the extent of their property and the permanence of their claim to it. What can be more pleasant, the editor of a magazine for gentlemen asked his readers, than to have the bounds and limits of your own property preserved and continued from age to age by the testimony of such living and growing witnesses? Planting trees had the additional advantage of being regarded as a patriotic act, for the Crown had declared a severe shortage of the hardwood on which the Royal Navy depended. For English aristocrats, planting trees served as statements to mark the lasting ownership of their land, and it was also considered to be an exhibition of their loyalty to the nation. In studies examining the effectiveness of vitamin C, researchers typically divide the subjects into two groups. One group, the experimental group, receives a vitamin C supplement, and the other, the control group, does not. Researchers observe both groups to determine whether one group has fewer or shorter colds than the other. The following discussion describes some of the pitfalls inherent in an experiment of this kind and ways to avoid them. In sorting subjects into two groups, researchers must ensure that each person has an equal chance of being assigned to either the experimental group or the control group. This is accomplished by randomization, that is, the subjects are chosen randomly from the same population by flipping a coin, or some other method involving chance. Randomization helps to ensure that the results reflect the treatment and not factors that might influence the grouping of subjects. Importantly, the two groups of people must be similar and must have the same track record with respect to colds to rule out the possibility that observed differences in the rate, severity, or duration of colds might have occurred anyway. If, for example, the control group would normally catch twice as many colds as the experimental group, then the findings prove nothing. In experiments involving a nutrient, the diets of both groups must also be similar, especially with respect to the nutrient being studied. If those in the experimental group were receiving less vitamin C from their usual diet, then any effects of the supplement may not be apparent. Congratulations! That was the first word that Stephen saw when he opened the envelope that his dad handed to him. He knew that he would win the essay contest. Overly excited, he shouted, "Hooray!" At that moment, 2 tickets to Ace Amusement Park, the prize, slipped out of the envelope. He picked them up and read the letter thoroughly while sitting on the stairs in front of his house. "Wait a minute, that's not my name," he said, puzzled. The letter was addressed to his classmate Stephanie, who had also participated in the contest. Reading on, Stephen realized the letter had been delivered mistakenly. Unfortunately, it should have gone to Stephanie, who was the real winner. He looked at the tickets and then the letter. He had really wanted those tickets. He had planned to go there with his younger sister. Stephen was his sister's hero, and he had bragged to her that he would win the contest. However, if she found out that her hero hadn't won, she would be terribly disappointed, and he would feel ashamed. "If I don't tell Stephanie, perhaps she will never know," Stephen thought for a moment. He remembered that the winner would only be notified by mail. As long as he kept quiet, nobody would know. So he decided to sleep on it. The next morning, he felt miserable, and his dad recognized it right away. "What's wrong, son?" asked his dad. Stephen was hesitant at first, but soon disclosed his secret. After listening attentively to the end, his dad advised him to do the right thing. Once Stephen had heard his dad's words, tears started to fill up in his eyes. "I was foolish," Stephen said regretfully. He took the letter and the prize to school and handed them to Stephanie. He congratulated her wholeheartedly, and she was thrilled. On the way home after school, his steps were light and full of joy. That night, his dad was very pleased to hear what he had done at school. "I am so proud of you, Stephen," he said. Then, without a word, he handed Stephen 2 Ace Amusement Park tickets and winked.
Good job!